Hey guys, I'm Hiragi. This story is all about what if Naruto found out about the Uzumaki clan and was a prodigy. A small twist of fate made him aware of his heritage, unsealing the legacies his parents left behind. Graduating from the academy at age 7, he's well on his way. He found a kindred spirit in Uchiha Itachi, and his cousin Shisui's along for the ride. They're on the path to unsealing the legacy left by their ancestors, both the dark and the light. Before we proceed with the story, please like and subscribe to this channel if you liked the video, and don't forget to check the description for the other works of the author if you liked the story. Let's start. Chapter 1, The Fourth Hokage's Legacy. Naruto was well aware he was disliked by a majority of the Konoha population, hated even. However, even though they hated him, he was never harmed. He received no more than an icy glare, insults behind his back, and shunning. His safety was ensured by the Umbu guards the Sandaime ordered to protect him, but it still hurt emotionally. The old man would have prevented his people from hurting the boy's heart if he could, but to enforce a law like that was impossible. Not to mention until now, those who held a grudge against the Kyuubi never tried anything against its container in fear the demon itself would run amok. The people of Konoha weren't crazy, but even the Hokage couldn't keep an eye on every shinobi. And even if he could, there was always that one individual that would spell trouble over Konoha's jinchuriki. Danzo was a prime example. Nevertheless, Sarutobi Hiruzen counted his blessings. He didn't yet need his Umbu to get rid of those stupid enough to harm Naruto. However, that night changed everything. Hiragi Yuma was a survivor of the Third Shinobi War, one of the first fujinjutsu users in Iwa. He retired from his profession shortly after the war ended, because he wasn't just a regular seal master who worked in the village. Researching and producing seals for a living was not for him. He was a frontline seal master who worked as backup on the battlefield. His forte was fast execution of a seal rather than the complexity of it, allowing him to support his comrades. However, no one was fast enough to deal with Konoha's yellow flash. He was thoroughly humiliated when Namikaze Minato slaughtered the Iwa force before he could even pick a brush. The only reason he survived the encounter was because he was hiding under his comrade's corpse, suppressing his chakra. He would never forget the eyes that appeared to glow a brilliant shade of delphinium when they gazed in his direction. His breath had hitched, and he'd wondered if the sense of inevitable death was a shared feeling among his comrades in face of the swift and deadly yellow flash. But Yuma did not hold a grudge against Namikaze Minato like the rest of his village. He found it to be pointless since people on both sides were dying. Instead, he chose to admire him as a seal master. The man was a genius, and Yuma was envious. He was talented in sealing, having spent his whole life mastering it, but he would never come close to Namikaze's level. The saying, talent hits a target no one else can hit, while genius hits a target that no one else can see, couldn't be truer. Namikaze Minato set his own unreachable target, creating seals no one previously thought to be possible. Yuma retired knowing it was time to give up chasing Namikaze. The gap between them was too large to be closed, and chasing the dream was pointless. However, in his 5th year of retirement, news spread like wildfire that Namikaze Minato died when the Kyuubi attacked Konoha. Rumors started floating, most were nonsense, but one caught his interest. Namikaze Minato had given up his life using a seal against Kyuubi, and there was a possibility Konoha created another jinchuriki. It was obvious to say Yuma was curious. A high-level seal master wouldn't die sealing a biju so long as it was performed right. Namikaze dying from a mistake was a far-fetched idea considering many masters before him had succeeded. That meant only one thing. Namikaze Minato had used a special kind of seal that required such a sacrifice. Konoha was probably the only village that would never flaunt their jinchuriki. In fact, all that anyone knew was that Konoha possessed the Kyuubi, and that there were 2 jinchuriki before the most recent one. The first fact was common knowledge. The second fact could be known if one calculated a person's lifespan. His curiosity about the last seal Namikaze Minato ever created grew, and he decided to pay Konoha a visit. He had to find Konoha's 3rd jinchuriki. The Yondaime Hokage's legacy. It was no easy feat sneaking into Konoha, especially with the barrier created by the Uzumaki clan protecting the village. He would have had to devote a lot of time and research into exploiting a weak spot, but fortunately, he found someone willing to trade information. In exchange for a safe route, all he had to do was hand over his life's work to Konoha's most dangerous missing nin, Orochimaru. It was almost an unfair exchange, but seeing the last work of Namikaze himself was worth it. Once he was able to sneak in, it was a piece of cake. Hiragi Yuma might be a top seal master of Iwa, but he never made a name for himself, considering Namikaze Minato and Jiraiya of the Sun-In were hugging all the fame. He didn't even bother with a henge, dressing like a civilian was enough to do the trick. Finding info about their jinchuriki was surprisingly easy, and all it took was sitting in front of a dango shop. When 6-year-old blonde boy with blue eyes walked past, civilians and shinobi alike gave him a wide berth while breaking into a hushed whisper. Yuma easily overheard one of the customers in the dango shop mutter monster under his breath. Bingo! Yuma didn't cheer mentally for long, because he soon realized this hated child couldn't be walking around without supervision. Umbu had to be near to keep an eye on the child. It was the standard protocol for all non-adult jinchuriki, and this child was no exception. If his experience of watching over Han was anything to go by, then this child was shunned by his own village out of fear. How stupid! What if the child snapped and went berserk? Iwa had learned the hard way with Han. If not for Raushi and Onaki subduing the young jinchuriki, Iwa would have done the equivalent of suicide and embarrassingly wiped themselves off the map. Now, though, Iwa learned to deal with their jinchuriki by letting them get away from the village, or in other words, voluntary exile. But forget about his village and their jinchuriki for now. He had to think of how to get to the child without Umbu noticing. He was a simple Takubitsu Jonin, so taking on Konoha's Umbu was definitely suicide. He had to be extremely careful when following the child and his guards, since it was easy to alert them accidentally. He observed them from afar for days and found Umbu didn't follow the child 24/7. Surprisingly, because they couldn't. Once in a while, the child would prank the villagers for attention or to deal out some form of payback. When the boy would flee or hide, the Umbu had a hard time following him even with his bright hair color and vibrant, orange shirt. The boy could be stealthy when he wanted to be, it seemed. Of course, Umbu didn't lose him for long, maybe a few minutes or so, but that was plenty enough time for Yuma. On his 6th day in Konoha, he planted a number of seals in the main marketplace and waited for the show to begin. He was not disappointed when the jinchuriki executed his latest prank, a pink-colored smoke spreading throughout the marketplace. It was harmless, but the rose smell was strong enough to make even women flee to escape the sickening sweet smell. Yuma himself almost hurled but refrained, because today's prank would serve his cause well. Once again, Umbu lost their charge, and this time it was longer than usual because of the smoke and smell. In the same time, Yuma activated his seal, which caused the other side of the marketplace to explode. It was harmless in that it was mostly smoke and sound. It was designed to be a distraction with minor damage and no casualties, so they would be more inclined to believe it was the jinchuriki's prank. Umbu, of course, thought it was their charge or a possible enemy ninja, but for a moment, Yuma feared that the Umbu would linger. He grinned as they rushed away, allowing him to duck into the small alleyway he saw the boy run in earlier. Yuma couldn't believe his luck when he saw the jinchuriki still there, hopping up to reach the rooftop of a building nearby. The jinchuriki was obviously curious about the explosion. Wonder what happened over there? Enemy ninja. His eyes widened when he felt pain on the back of his head, and then everything went black. Yuma sighed in relief as he hoisted the jinchuriki on his back. He then applied a genjutsu over the child so he looked like a little, brunette girl with fair skin. He quickly retreated back to the crowded street a bit further away from the market where the civilians were busy fussing over the jinchuriki's latest prank. Yuma stiffened and turned away when he saw a woman with a sun glance at him curiously. His eyes briefly caught the red and white fan symbol stitched into their clothes and flinched. Uchiha. Shit. Anu. The seal master turned around slowly, faking a kind fatherly smile. Ah, good afternoon, Uchiha-san. He greeted the Uchiha woman genially. What a fine day, isn't it? Uchiha Mikoto raised an eyebrow. It had been a while since anyone greeted an Uchiha so politely like this man did. She had called out to him simply because she sensed something off about him, or was it the child? Now that she thought about it, it was probably her just being paranoid. Good afternoon to you, too. The breeze is indeed very nice today. Is that why your daughter fell asleep? She asked with a smile on her lips. The man nodded stiffly. Yes, she also exhausted herself playing in the playground today. He added, mentally cursing himself for engaging in a conversation with an Uchiha. It was truly fortunate he hadn't used a henge at all on himself. If he had, she would be even more suspicious. I see. She said softly. Then I will be on my way. She muttered as she turned to walk away, but Sasuke stopped her with a frown. Ka-san. Mikoto tugged on Sasuke's hand, gently dragging him with her. Not now, Sasuke. If there's anything you want to buy it'll have to wait, she said as the father-daughter pair walked away from them. But, Ka-san. Sasuke whined. That man lied. Sasuke, the Uchiha matriarch warned. Don't accuse someone you just met, especially a civilian at that. They were in a bad enough position in the village as it was, and it would be bad if rumors of Sasuke accusing civilians as liars spread. Besides, why would he lie to me? She asked logically. Sasuke frowned, then muttered, yes, Ka-san. Obediently, he followed his mother back to the Uchiha compound. Sasuke recalled the only playground in Konoha was not currently usable. When he and Itachi had walked around the park yesterday, there was a repair in progress sign near the playground. Itachi was shaking his head when he said someone named Guy accidentally ran into it or something along that line. So that man lied to his mother about his daughter exhausting herself playing, but Ka-san was right. The man had no reason to lie, or did he? Ka-san wouldn't listen, so he'd have to tell his brother later. Naruto blinked his eyes open and looked at his surroundings. He was in a large room with lots of boxes and bottles, a sake warehouse. He crinkled his nose at the scent. He hated the smell of sake as it reminded him of the drunks that said unpleasant things to him. Naruto startled when he set his eyes on a stranger smiling at him with a genuine smile. The man had long, brown hair and green eyes, and his build was similar to the Umbu he had seen before with a dog mask. Hello, kid, are you alright? Yuma asked. Now that he had a close look at the child, Yuma could see the similarity between him and Namikaze. Iwa would freak if they knew the Yondaime Hokage had managed to procreate and turn the boy into a jinchuriki. Who are you? I am Uzumaki Naruto. The Hokage had told him that it was common courtesy to give his own name before asking for someone else's. Uzumaki? He raised an eyebrow at the name. Yuma pointed at his chest and said, Me? My name is Hiragi, so just call me Hiragi-san. His family name was pretty common, so telling the child was harmless. Hiragi-san, Naruto tested the name. I think I will call you Aji-chan instead. Yuma sighed. He deserved it since he was the same age as the Yondaime. Fine. Naruto eyed Yuma curiously. Why am I here? He asked. He grinned at that and said, Oh, you were knocked out by a bad person. I saved you and brought you here. If his observation was correct, this child had never been attacked before and incredibly lonely. If someone saved him, they could easily earn his trust. You're safe here, Naruto-kun. And for added bonus, he ruffled the child's soft, spiky hair. This was the moment of truth. If a shunned jinchuriki was touched, they would either lash out or welcome the affection as a sign of trust. As expected, the child looked at him admiringly. Thank you, Aji-chan. Yuma smirked inwardly. That had been easier than he'd thought it would be. You're welcome, Naruto-kun. Then he added after a beat, but it seems the enemy ninja did something to you. He lied smoothly. I can fix it for you though, Yuma assured the child. Don't worry and just leave everything to me. Naruto paled at the thought of an enemy ninja having done something horrible to him. Now. Yuma rummaged through his backpack and pulled out a storage scroll. He unsealed a wooden board the size of an adult with a seal array carved into it. Naruto watched the unsealing in awe. That's so cool, Hiragi Yujichan. What is that? Ninjutsu. Hiragi smirked. Not quite his father's child, huh? This is fujinjutsu. It's one of the most complex shinobi arts, see this array here. He tapped the board on the ground. You use hand seals to mold chakra for ninjutsu, while in fujinjutsu we use these to tell chakra what to do. Is it hard? Naruto's eyes were shining with glee. Depends on you. He didn't see anything wrong with indulging the child. He needed Naruto's full cooperation anyway. You have to be good in arithmetic, chakra theory, and calligraphy basically. Naruto crinkled his nose. I don't like any of that. Can that even be used like cool ninjutsu? Hiragi snorted. The Yondaime Hokage was a magnificent seal master. The next thing Hiragi knew, Naruto had latched his small body onto his arm like a koala. Teach me. He gave the seal master his puppy eyes. Please. Hiragi faltered. He had discovered another scary way to use Namikaze's azure eyes. I will fix you first, then we can talk about this again, okay, kid? Okay. Naruto agreed as he hopped off of Hiragi, bouncing on his feet. The seal master sweat dropped at the sight of the hyper kid and silently thanked God that he was no longer an Iwa shinobi. Namikaze surely knew how to pick a wife. The rumor of his lover being the habanero was true, it seemed. The two monsters of Konoha procreated. This kid would be one hell of a shinobi. Then again, it was none of his business. He only wanted the data of Namikaze's last work, and then he was going to get out of Konoha faster than you could say ninja. Now lay down here, Naruto-kun, and take off your shirt. Naruto obeyed the instruction, but shuddered when his skin touched the cold wood. Now what, Hiragi Ojichin? He asked. Hiragi smiled. Just relax, you're going to fall asleep, and when I finish you will be as good as new. Okay. Naruto cheered. Hiragi formed seals for a sleep-inducing genjutsu, and Naruto quickly fell asleep. Finally, he sighed in relief. Pretending to be a kind uncle is exhausting. He grumbled under his breath, now, let me see the last work of Namikaze Minato. He activated the seal array on the board, causing a seal to appear on Naruto's stomach. He gaped at the sight. Unbelievable, no wonder he died to make this. The seal was different than any other seal he'd seen before. There was not just one seal, there was 3 layers of seals. At first glance, it would look like only one seal, but a top-notch seal master would know there were 2 other seals. The first seal was the main seal that tied the jinchuriki and his biju together. The second and third, however, would be triggered in certain circumstances. Hiragi would bet they were fail-safe seals, and, considering the main seal and the biju it held, it made Hiragi wonder what kind of seal those were. No one ever made a fail-safe seal for a jinchuriki. Then again, villages that had jinchuriki didn't have Namikaze Minato. Hiragi couldn't suppress his growing curiosity and envy of the last work of the Yondaime. He badly wanted to unravel the seal, but that would have required him to be on the same level as Namikaze Minato or risk his life. He cackled at the thought. If I died here it would be justified. I was supposed to die when he slaughtered my team anyway. It would be an honor to die for my research. He wondered if this was his sanity wavering again, one of the many reasons for his retirement. Then again, why would he care for the consequences? The worst thing that could happen would be unleashing the Kyuubi in Konoha, and that would only be giving Konoha what it deserved. Naruto would never have been so vulnerable and easily swayed if they hadn't shunned him. It was probably charity to the brat to let him have his own revenge. With that in mind, Hiragi continued his work, but first sealed everything he cherished inside a special storage scroll. It was more durable than the average storage scroll in that it could withstand explosive tags and other harming elements. Nothing weaker than a bijudama could destroy it, he supposed as he began to work. Kyuubi perked up, growling when he saw the Yondaime walk up to his cage. What do you want, Yondaime? Someone is trying to tamper with the seal, the blonde Hokage muttered. I don't know why, but it activated the failsafe temporarily. Kushina then appeared beside him. It activated mine too. She growled. Who's the fool? If I get my hands on the guy I'll kill him. Kyuubi rolled his eyes. You're dead, Kushina, he pointed out with a deadpan tone. The second jinchuriki of the Kyuubi glared at her ex-prisoner. Thank you for reminding me, she growled, but what happened to my son? He was her main concern. Minato paled when he saw Kyuubi's chakra leak from his cage. Kyuubi. You. The biju bared his fangs. Not my doing, Yondaime. In case your memory is as bad as your mate's, your seal is designed so the brat can borrow my chakra. The fox pointed out. I did not will even a small fraction of it to leak into his system, so if it kills the brat and me too, you have no one to blame but yourself. Minato grit his teeth. You really? His eyes widened. Kushina. Your chakra. Kushina looked at herself. My chakra, it seeped into Naruto's. Mine too, what's happening? Is the failsafe seal broken? He quickly went to check the seal on the Cubia's cell. This one is safe, at least, for now. Kushina breathed a sigh of relief. That's good, I checked the failsafe chakra too and it doesn't seem like it's going to break but... Minato asked, dreading her next words. But what? Some of our chakra and memories has seeped through because of this. I don't know how it will affect our son. Kushina clasped her fingers together. Naruto. Kyuubi snorted, it's been boring here save for his occasional prank anyway. As long as it's not life-threatening, who cares? We care. The fox laughed at that, but frowned when he saw the Yondaime and his wife disappear from the sewer. It seemed the seal had stabilized again. He wondered what had happened to them just now, though he didn't truly care. He just didn't want the couple to be able to annoy him all the time. Hiragi left the warehouse in a daze, terrified of what he'd almost done. He at first thought he could be careless even if he was killed when he examined the seal, but the chakra excess Naruto emitted almost made him insane with the killing intent. Kyuubi's chakra was malicious. It didn't matter how hardened you were as a shinobi, it would make you quiver in fear. It was just so intense and full of hatred, it terrorized your senses until you wanted nothing but for it to stop. It was a mistake. A mistake. He puked the contents of his stomach and then toddled like a newborn calf. He leaned against a tree, his eyes glazed as his whole body trembled. A squad of Umbu landed in front of him, ordering him to come with them without resistance and so on. The same standard procedure in every village. Too bad for them, he had no intentions of going with them, knowing he would be interrogated. He had made a mistake that left his mind in shambles, and the only salvation was what any seal master would do. While it had to do with the offspring of the genius bastard he'd been jealous of for so long, at least he was certain his life's work wouldn't be lost in vain. Back in the warehouse, Naruto woke up with a yawn and looked around to find the nice Aji-chan was nowhere to be seen. He was about ready to cry at being left alone once again, but his teary eyes caught sight of an expensive-looking scroll right beside him. His eyes widened when he saw the note attached to it. Naruto-kun, I have to leave for an important mission and will likely never come back. As promised, here is a scroll to teach you everything I know about fujinjutsu. Use this scroll to follow in your father's footsteps and become a great seal master. I am sorry I left without telling you. Goodbye. Naruto smiled. Hiragi Yuma didn't break his promise. He rubbed the inner side of his left thigh and applied the necessary amount of pressure. It was a failsafe he had never bothered to remove, a sheet of poison his superior had planted in his leg for suicide. As pain racked his body, Hiragi Yuma smiled at the Umbu who gasped at his pained expression. Namikaze, you better thank me for what I have given to your son. I may have tampered with the seal with my half-assed skill, but what I gave him. See you again in the next life, genius. Chapter 2. Second Legacy, Prisoner of Hatred. Humans are fickle beings, they could hate as strong as they love. Greedier than demon and seek pleasure from slaughtering for power. Kurama, the nine-tailed fox. Naruto ran back to his home with the scroll Hiragi Yuma gave him safely tucked in his backpack. He was grinning from ear to ear at the prospect of learning cool fujinjutsu and becoming a seal master like the Yondaime and Hiragi Yuma. He frowned at the sight of an Umbu squad stationed in front of his home and stopped before jogging to them. Hello, good evening, what ya doing here? The Umbu with a bird-looking mask crossed his arms. Where were you, Naruto-kun? Tori asked worriedly. They had gotten the corpse of the man suspected for kidnapping Naruto, but further investigation indicated the man was alone. They had combed through the Aniter village before being ordered to wait for the child in front of his home, while another squad was assigned to continue their search. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Shouldn't you know where I am? Like all the time. He pointed out, innocently unaware he had scored a jab on the Umbu squad, losing him again. Naruto-kun, Tori warned, flushing under his mask, we're going to see Hokage-sama. And then after a beat he added, and you're grounded. 3 days of no pranking and no ramen. Naruto flinched at that. Sorry, Tori. I'll just put my backpack in my room first, okay? A bare-masked Umbu stretched his hand out to Naruto, and the boy quietly gave the backpack to him. Kuma sighed as he jumped to Naruto's balcony and put the backpack there. No one would steal it anyway. Naruto opened his mouth to protest leaving his backpack there, but Tori hoisted him up onto his shoulder like a sack of potatoes before he could. You're in trouble, Naruto-kun, Tori stated in a stern tone as they took their first leap to the Hokage Tower. But Tori, Naruto whined. Tori was the only Umbu of the squad who talked to him. It was not like the rest of the squad was not allowed to speak, but Tori was the spokesman of the squad. But throughout his childhood Naruto could discern from their body language what they wanted to convey. If they crossed their arms with a lifted chin or tapped their limbs, that meant he was in trouble and was going to get grounded. If their shoulders shook slightly, that meant he had done something that amused them. No buts. Naruto had read the rest of the note Hiragi left, including the part that asked him to keep the scroll a secret. Hiragi meant for the scroll to be for Naruto alone, not Konoha. If they knew about the scroll it would be taken away from him, and while the child was warned of that prospect, he was torn between telling Hokage Itachi and lying to him. The Hokage had always been kind to him and had even assigned an Umbu squad to protect him. Naruto owed the Sandaime a lot, and the least he could do was be honest with him. But Sandaime Itachi never told him anything about his parents, and whenever Naruto asked, he swiftly dodged the question. The only thing Naruto knew was that they had passed away as heroes, but how they were heroes was never explained. He also never told him why he was shunned by everyone either. I fell asleep in the forest. Technically it was true. He had been sleeping, but it was in a sake warehouse on the outskirts of Konoha. The weather was nice, and when I woke up was it late, he mumbled. Since Sandaime didn't trust him with a number of things, Naruto thought it was only fair he kept some secrets, too. The Sandaime, of course, was well aware that Naruto was lying, but what good would it do to force the truth out of Naruto? The child had a stubborn streak a mile wide that he'd inherited from his parents. I see. You may go. That night changed everything. On the way back home, he was once again carried by Tori. Naruto's eyes were glazed as a number of scenes played out in his mind. The main character is just like you, sensei. Naruto, it's a beautiful name. Realize what's the most important thing to your brother. I hope our sons will be good friends. Neither shinobi nor jinchuriki. Naruto. Tori called out. He chuckled when he saw the boy was sleeping on his back. Fell asleep, I see. Kuma snorted. He ran us dry today. Deep within Naruto, Kyuubi scrunched his nose. It seemed what the Yondaime and his wife feared had come true. The memories and chakra had leaked into Naruto's system. Never mind Kyuubi's problem though. The biju was well aware there were small amounts of his chakra leaking into Naruto to build the boy's resistance to it. Kyuubi had been pretty much resigned about it since the moment he was sealed into Naruto. Clink clank clink. He'd had 2 women as his jinchuriki, so a brat couldn't be any worse of an option in his book. He had contemplated driving Naruto insane, but his pride wouldn't allow him to sink to the same level as Shukaku. Seriously, that Tanuki brought a bad name to Biju, always throwing his name around in his drunken stupors. Had he no shame or pride to keep the honorable name their father bestowed upon them? Clink clank clink. Speaking of pride, he wondered how his fellow Biju were faring with their jinchuriki. When Kushina was still alive he had heard about Madatabi and Jiyuki. It seemed Jiyuki had been a good friend with his jinchuriki or something like that. Ha! The second strongest Biju had submit himself to a life of servitude for shinobi. Clink clank clink. Shut up. Kyuubi roared to no one in particular. Kushina. Stop playing with your chain or I will. He paused, contemplating what he could do to threaten his ex-jailer, someone who was an avatar that existed by chakra and the memory of her son. Nothing came up. Wait a minute, The avatar should be back to a dormant state by now, so where was the rattling sound coming from? On second thought, he couldn't care less. He just wanted it to stop. The next morning. I can't sleep, it's so noisy, what a dream, full of a rattling chain. Naruto mumbled, blissfully unaware that his tenant wholeheartedly agreed with him. I didn't even check on the scroll Hiragi Yuma left me. He blinked at the thought and went to his window. He opened it and shouted to a tree on the left. Tori, can you tell Hokage Yuma I won't go to the academy today? Tori almost fell comically from his tree. Then again, it was just a daily portion of bruised pride when regarding Uzumaki Naruto. The boy could easily spot them and identify them by name. Naruto couldn't see them, but he could sense them. Sometimes he wondered if Naruto was a sensor type, but according to the Hokage, it was in the Uzumaki blood to have a sharp intuition. The Umbu sighed. Naruto-kun. He was about to chide the blonde boy but stopped when he saw the tired look on Naruto's face. What's wrong? Didn't get enough sleep. I can't sleep, he answered. Nightmare. Naruto shook his head. It was a noisy dream. The sound of a rattling chain echoing in a sewer. I will send a message to Hokage-sama, Tori said. Go back to sleep, Naruto-kun. My head is throbbing, Tori. The Umbu frowned. We'll go see a doctor then. Naruto was too tired to protest that he disliked hospitals. K. Sanada Anza was the only medic Sandaime trusted to handle Naruto with care. She had been, after all, a dear friend of Kushina's. She had black hair that held a green sheen to it and steel-colored eyes. Anza was dressed in the standard outfit for female medics of Konoha. She was one of the few medic nin lucky enough to be taught by Tsunade of the Sunin. She was not an apprentice of Tsunade, but back in the Third Shinobi War, she had been part of a medic class Tsunade had taught. In spite of her vast array of knowledge, she was nowhere near Tsunade's level, but she was good enough to be head doctor of the hospital. Unfortunately, her health was not the best and she would retire within the next 2 years. She had been reckless when she was younger and had been poisoned by a Sunanin on one of her missions. While immediate death was avoided by neutralizing the poison, Anzu had discovered not all of the poison from back then had been removed from her system. Now it was gnawing on her liver and heart and, within the next 2 years, would reach her nervous system and paralyze her. Anzu doubted Tsunade-sama herself could heal her, but she was content with continuing to serve Konoha. Her only worries were about Kushina's son. The boy was a frequent patient, though thankfully not because of the hate of the villagers. If she retired, would her replacement treat the boy like she did? The boy rarely got sick, but when he did it was just a mild flu or fever. He also received minor injuries from his prank escapades. Anzu recalled Kushina was the same way back then. At first, after she'd found out about Kushina's status, she was confused about why Kushina needed medical treatment from time to time. Apparently, her tenant wouldn't heal minor injuries, because it was beneath it to give so many favors. She recalled Kushina didn't have the best relationship with her tenant, and she had to wonder if it would treat Naruto the same way too. So, Naruto-kun, had trouble sleeping. Anzu eyed her patient keenly, then briefly glanced at the bird-masked Umbu. The boy looked like he was sleeping soundly, but it was obvious he was troubled. All this time I thought he was the type who could sleep through an ox stampede. His mother could when she was off duty. Tori nodded. He said, it was a noisy dream. The sound of a rattling chain echoing in a sewer, he quoted. Anzu raised an eyebrow. Chain. That oddly reminded her of Kushina. I don't want to give him sleep medicine. She had learned from Kushina it wasn't effective anyway. I guess we can only observe him and make sure he is fine. There's nothing we can do for now. Anzu had no idea how correct she was. Naruto awoke to the sound of feral screaming and wet feet. He wondered how he got there as the last thing he remembered was napping on Tori's back on the way to the hospital. Since when did the hospital look like a sewer? It wasn't hygienic, right? He thought out loud, almost falling down when the feral voice screamed louder, thundering throughout the sewer. If you know it's unhygienic, don't turn your mind into a sewer, brat. My mind. He echoed as he ran to the source of the voice. Who's there? It didn't take long for him to find a giant cage and a pair of red eyes glowing in the deep darkness within. Kyubi moved closer to the bars with bared fangs. I see that my jailer has decided to grace me with his presence. He would have tried to intimidate the boy with his claws, but decided against it because distressing the brat risked the seal reacting in the undesirable way it did last night. Jailer? Naruto repeated. Who? Me. Yes, you. The Kyubi growled, and after a beat added under his breath, to my everlasting shame. He was pretty grumpy because of the noise from before and because of the fact it sounded eerily like Kushina's chain. Naruto looked at the giant shadow with red eyes with childish curiosity. You're big. Very observant, he said sardonically. Naruto beamed at that. Thanks. Rubbing the back of his head with that sheepish smile eerily reminded the Kyubi of Kushina's habit when she was embarrassed. You're not even old enough to recognize sarcasm. Kyubi rolled his eyes. I bet you don't even know what sarcasm is. Oh. Can you teach me then? Naruto asked innocently. The giant shadow with red eyes was nice. For someone like Naruto who had been ignored by a majority of Konoha's population, having someone talk civilly to him was enough to consider said person as a potential friend. The Umbu were nice, but they only interacted with him if it was necessary. What's sarcasm? Is it something good? Kyubi sighed. This was why he preferred his jinchuriki to be at least capable of comprehending he was a dangerous being. Heh. What a child, whatever, go away brat. I need my beauty sleep. Oh, you're a girl. I thought your voice was a bit low like man. Sorry. He chirped. Kyubi's left eye twitched angrily. I am no woman, brat. Now go away and never come back. A spell of silence hung in the air until it was broken by a choked sob. Heek. If anything, his eye twitching didn't subside even as the brat in front of him burst into waterworks. Why are you crying, brat? Naruto hiccuped. You told me to go away, heek. Just like the parents of the children he tried to play with. You don't want me here, heek. You want to get away from me. He sobbed. Kyubi sighed. I wish I could. He had zero intentions of consoling the brat. Who cared if he cried? It was something new at least. Mito and Kushina never let themselves show any weakness in front of him. Then again, the brat was an innocent child. Unfortunately, he had nursed his hatred for too many years to care for the brat's woes. He was as unwilling as Naruto was with this arrangement of jailer and prisoner. In fact, more so considering he had dealt with confinement for many more years. Speaking of the brat, why had he become so quiet now? You can't. Why? Naruto had stopped crying and was looking at the biju with wide, curious eyes. There was something in those eyes, and Kyubi's mind went into autopilot like all living creatures did when faced with puppy dog eyes. The eyes demanded to be given into two. I was sealed in you, so like it or not I am going to be here for your whole life. Mentally, Kyubi hit himself for giving in. You. Naruto stammered in disbelief. Will be. He took a deep breath, with me forever. To my everlasting shame, Kyubi admitted with a growl. I am inside your mindscape, so yeah, you live, I live unless you screw up. The last part was muttered under his breath. Naruto's big, blue eyes widened as he took in what Kyubi said. He didn't understand why Kyubi was stuck with him, but what he did understand was that someone would always be with him. He would never be alone again. So what he should do now was get the big shadow to like him. A new SAA. Will you be my friend? He asked with the most pleading voice he could muster. Kyubi's eyes widened in disbelief. The brat asked what? Friend. Had he been dropped on his head or something? Do you know who I am? He asked back. No. Naruto chirped. What in Rokuda-sennin's name was the brat thinking? Wanting to be his friend was crazy enough, but asking someone he didn't even know to be his friend was even more bizarre. Then again, Kyubi's previous jinchuriki never suffered isolation like Naruto did, because their status was a well-kept secret from civilians and lower-ranked ninjas. While Kushina had suffered a bit because of racism in the beginning, it hadn't lasted long because she'd begun dating Namikaze Minato and people had forgotten her foreign status in the midst of war. In Naruto's case, however, he didn't even have a clue about why he was hated and ignored to the point of being desperate for attention. The gears in his mind started working. The prospect of having a too naive jinchuriki affected their survival rate negatively. The previous night's incident was a testament to how dangerously naive Naruto was because of his longing. "Brat, do you know what happened on October 10th 6 years ago?" For survival's sake, the brat could cry himself hoarse, but he wasn't going to get both of them killed because he craved attention. Naruto tilted his head to the side. The Yondaime Hokage defeated the Kyuubi no Yuko and heroically saved Konoha. Everyone in Konoha knew about it, it was common knowledge. Kyuubi groaned as he moved forward, revealing his body to the child. As expected, the child froze. "And yet here I am. That was the bullshit your old Hokage fed to you younglings. I am an immortal being. Not even the Yondaime could kill me." The strongest biju hissed, revealing his sharp teeth. Naruto looked up at the demon, stricken by fear at the sight of the nine-tailed fox. He was gargantuan. The tale about his gigantic body was not an exaggeration. "You're the Kyuubi? You're sealed in me? Is that why grown-ups hate me?" You're not as stupid as I thought." It seemed the brat was not a lost cause. "They think you're my reincarnation or something along that line. Fools. All of them. They fear a helpless child like you, how foolish." Naruto stared at Kyuubi. Did the fox just give a sound reason about why he was hated? Did he just call the villagers stupid, for hating him? For mistaking him as its reincarnation? Logic told him to fear the Kyuubi, but his heart was elated that someone else felt he didn't deserve their hatred. Humans are fickle beings, they can hate as strong as they love, are greedier than a demon and seek pleasure from slaughtering for power. "Is that why you attacked Konoha?" Naruto blurted out the first question that came to his mind without even realizing it. "Because humans are horrible," he added. "Were we punished by Kami-sama?" Kyuubi couldn't believe his ears. Why didn't the child break out into a hysterical fit and blame all his misery on him? Why did he ask about the reason he attacked Konoha? "Brat, I hate Konoha. A pure and simple reason for attacking the village." "Why?" Naruto asked again. "Why you ask?" Kyuubi returned the question with another. "I hate Konoha, that's all there is to it." Naruto shook his head fervently. "All this time, I never knew why they hated me, and it hurt so bad." He mumbled as tears streamed down his cheeks. "I didn't know what I did to deserve it. To them, I am that child or Bakemono. They never cared about who I am, and yet they hate me so much." He looked up to his prisoner, azure eyes locked onto Kyuubi as red. "When you told me why they hate me, I was so angry, scared, and relieved." The biju stared at the child with disbelief evident in his feral face. "Relieved?" Kyuubi repeated incredulously. "You're relieved because now you know why they hate you?" Naruto nodded. "It still hurts," he admitted with a pained grin, "but at least I know it's not my fault. Now, I know I don't deserve that hatred. That's why. I want to know why you hate Konoha and humans so much, please, tell me." Kyuubi couldn't believe he was considering responding. All his life he had been controlled and seen as a lesser being with the base nature of wrath. Uchiha Madara had viewed him as a tool to control with his so-called blessed eyes. Senju Hashirama called him a creature too terrible to be free, and Uzumaki Mito and Kushina bound him to them to keep the world safe from him. He was a mass of chakra and hatred they feared, and yet humans were ignorant of what caused that hatred to grow within him. They feared his hatred and yet they nursed said hatred by imprisoning and using him. All of them, even the shinobi who claimed to be the strongest among their kind, were guilty of this. And yet, this one child was the only one who had bothered to ask. A child of 6 years old, young even by human standards. Shukaku, Madatabi, Isabi, Sangoku, Kokuo, Seiken, Chome, Jyoki, and Kurama, one day. Someday, will. True power. Kyuubi gritted his teeth, recalling the memory about the human who saw them as his children, the only man whose death he had shed tears for. This child bore many similarities to his father, so maybe this child was different than the other worthless humans. Your village has been imprisoning me for years, binding me to their will. He began. The Shodai Hokage captured and sealed me to keep me at bay, passing me on from generation to generation. Then 6 years ago I was freed from the seal. That's why you attacked Konoha when I was born? Naruto asked, his eyes still wide and glassy with tears. So many people died back then. Kyuubi snorted. If I'd had a choice, I would have left and never come back instead of risking my freedom to wreak havoc. The biju roared angrily, causing Naruto to be blown away into the watery surface. Revenge is one thing, freedom is quite another. But someone controlled me and made me attack your pathetic village. And guess what? I am sealed again within you. So, the attack is not your fault? Naruto asked. Hell no. See where it landed me? Kyuubi asked incredulously. I am no fool. And I. His eyes narrowed at his jinchuriki. The boy's shoulders were shaking. Brat, you. Ha 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 ha. What are you laughing at? Kyuubi roared irately. Naruto grinned from ear to ear. No, it's just, both of us are stuck to each other unwillingly, and neither of us are to blame. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Naruto kept laughing to the point Kyuubi thought his jinchuriki had gone mad. That only lasted for a short moment before a stream of tears soaked the child's cheek. Brat, are you crying, laughing, or both? They didn't seem like tears of happiness. It's just, it never ends, Naruto muttered sadly. I should hate the villagers since they made my life miserable, but, since they hate me because of you I should hate you instead. But you're stuck with me because, it's someone else's fault. Naruto shook his head. It just goes on, should I hate the Yondaime now for sealing you in me? No. He had to save Konoha, but then should I hate Konoha? And now, it's back to square one. His lips quivered. I thought I would be happy to know why I am hated by everyone, because then I could change their minds or even hate them back, but in the end, I can do neither, and it still hurts so much. Kyuubi eyed Naruto skeptically, looking for a sign of dishonesty. He found none. The boy was being honest. Then again, his family was never one to lie either. As much as he hated Mito and Kushina, he respected their sincerity. Other humans could betray and lie as easily as breathing, but not Mito and Kushina, and neither could this child it seemed. I see, so what would you do, child? And as expected, the boy was unaware Kyuubi called him child instead of brat. I don't know. Kyuubi sighed, it was never this complicated with his previous jinchuriki. Will you be my friend? The fox stared at Naruto then sighed. I thought I would get used to your antics, but I'm not, Kyuubi admitted. Not even the boy's mother could be so persistent, or even think of being his friend. Then again, Kushina was told by Mito that he was a mass of chakra full of hatred, while Naruto had no one to teach him that. Why would you want to be a friend of a biju? One who has terrorized your village and made you a pariah. Naruto grinned his first true smile since he found out about his jinchuriki status. Tori once said, birds of the same wings gather together, ... I think you mean birds of a feather flock together, Kyuubi corrected, rolling his eyes. The boy blinked at that. Yeah. And you see, since we're stuck together. I thought. No. Why not? Just because. Naruto harumphed. I guess this is what they call the courting process. He had seen a jonin attempt to befriend a pretty lady, and after said jonin failed, another jonin came and advised his friend to take it easy and slow the courting process. Kyuubi eyed his jinchuriki skeptically, wondering why he had to deal with this instead of Kushina and Minato. Courting is to get yourself a mate, child. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. Nice to meet you. Naruto started, coincidentally ignoring Kyuubi's correction. What's your name? He had seen a girl his age using the same introduction to be another girl's friend. They backed away when he tried the same thing though. Kyuubi groaned. You know who I am. Naruto tilted his head to the side in confusion. Is Kyuubi your real name? Kyuubi groaned again. He would disrespect his old man who gave him the name if he dared to say yes to that question. It's what I am. Nine Tails is not my real name. After a beat he added, and I'm not going to tell you either. But if it's what you are, I don't want to call you Kyubi anymore. Naruto refused with a scowl. That's like the villagers calling me that boy or monster. They don't care who I am. Kyubi sighed again. This was getting ridiculous. The brat was getting under his skin and he'd only known him for half an hour. It was record time. Fine. I am Kurama, and I. He shook his head. He was not going to rant about how he was the king of Mount Kurama, his tails, or his beauty like a certain ape brother of his. So your name is Kurama. Naruto beamed, and Kyubi was startled to see the boy was elated from learning his name. "Ne, my name means maelstrom, you know." Kurama snorted. The boy was a keen learner, observing how to make friends. What made the brat think it could work on a biju? Actually, you're named after another kind of Naruto that was randomly thought of when eating ramen, he muttered under his breath, recalling Kushina and Minato's conversation with the Toad Hermit. Did you say something? Naruto tilted his head to side, ears perked up at Kyubi. No. Oh okay, so what's your name mean? Naruto urged on, grinning from ear to ear. Kurama growled. Enough is enough. Don't keep pestering me. You should be honored I even bothered to tell you my name. I am not going to be your friend and that's it. Naruto looked like he was about to protest but held his tongue. He shook his head. I'm sorry for being annoying, Kurama. I'm just so used to acting that way so people will pay attention to me. The fox flinched involuntarily. That was a sore spot. But I'm not giving up about being your friend, because then, we can both stop hurting from this hatred. I guess I'll go now, but I will come back again, Kurama. He grinned. See you later, the jinchuriki said as he turned around and started to walk away. Oi Naruto. You can try. Kyubi considered that as a challenge and wanted to see if the brat would rise to the occasion in spite of all the odds. Naruto spun around, staring at the biju in shock. That was not a yes to be his friend, but it definitely wasn't outright rejection. That meant one day, Kurama would accept him as a friend. That was more of a chance than any of the villagers had given him, and here the biju they feared so much had given him a shred of hope. Thank you, Kurama. Naruto muttered in gratitude. Then after a beat he added, by the way, do you know how I get out? Kurama's left eye twitched violently. This isn't going to be the last time I deal with your idiocy, is it? Damn Minato and Kushina. Why did he have to deal with this? Oi, Naruto. For our survival's sake, stop trusting so easily. Unexpectedly, the boy nodded, his expression looking resigned as he accepted the truth reluctantly. Also, keep this encounter a secret. As kind as your Hokage appears, he has to put his pathetic village above everything else, including you. Naruto nodded again. I won't blame him for that either. He snorted at that. Whatever, but bear in mind that your life is not your own, and maybe one day you can prove yourself to be the one we have been waiting for so long. Kura, what do you? And everything went white. Naruto woke up and found the Sandaime hovering above him with a worried expression. Hokage Icon. Sandaime smiled at the child, caressing his yellow locks. How are you feeling, Naruto? The child stiffened for a moment, then his lips curved into a smile. I am fine, Jiji. He grinned from ear to ear. As good as new after some good sleep. The Hokage instantly knew Naruto was hiding something, but he didn't know what, and it wasn't wise to pressure the child. It must be depression because the villagers treated him badly again. I'm glad to hear that. It's almost dinner time and Sanada-sensei assured me you deserve a good meal instead of hospital food. Sanada knew how much her late friend and her son loved ramen. Ichiraku ramen. Naruto cheered. That night, another secret was made. In the back of his mind, Naruto wondered if the secrets would keep piling up or if he'd ever tell anything to Sandaime again. But if the Hokage and the whole village could keep secrets from him, why not the other way around? He should at least have that much. Chapter 3. Third Legacy, Origin of Legacy. Fujinjutsu was an obscure shinobi art most shinobi did not study extensively due to the research needed to master it. It was also notorious as being one of the most dangerous branches of the shinobi arts to learn. You would think an art that didn't involve physical training, but a brush, ink, and paper, was not dangerous. However, it was proved throughout the years as the most accident-prone art. Those who died learning fujinjutsu didn't die in the battlefield but in their own workshop. Even a small glob of ink in the wrong place could trigger a dangerous outcome. It's understandable why the Uzumaki clan was one of the few clans specialized in it. They had both the brain and vitality to survive and master the art. The art was said to have an endless amount possibilities, which was not a stretch of the imagination considering they could contain the most powerful creatures that ever graced Mother Earth. However, unlike the three main shinobi arts, ninjutsu, genjutsu, and taijutsu, fujinjutsu was not an art you could master by forming hand seals and training your ass off. If you survived learning the art by copying what's been done before, you were nothing more than a copier and never a master. Seals were like a machine in the form of ink, thus to create a seal, practitioners had to understand each part and the correlation between them. Mathematics, chakra theory, and calligraphy were the three basic skills one should achieve first before even thinking about picking up a brush and making their first stroke. You have to master calligraphy not with flourish but with precision, not with a graceful stroke but a swift one. If a practitioner was a frontline seal master, one stroke could decide life and death. Chakra was the energy that powered every seal, thus every shinobi who learned fujinjutsu had to understand the nature of the energy. How it would move, mold, change and so on when flowing through a seal, and how chakra with a certain nature could have different results when channeled, like explode. Mathematics was an abstract study of topics encompassing quantity, structure, space, and change. This subject was essential to the array of each component of the seal down to its very location. One had to practice step by step to reach a logical conclusion. Mathematical structures were used as models of seal mechanisms. A seal master should use mathematical reasoning to provide insight or predictions about the nature of the seal they were working on. Naruto wandered to the academy library, marveling at how it became such a magical place the moment he thirsted for knowledge. He picked a few books of his desired subjects and a few extras, and began to read it one by one. The book was meant for children, which was obvious by how thin it was and how it only just covered basic material, but it still had a lot of information to memorize. Naruto had no delusions he could jam everything in his brain, so he resorted to taking notes to learn it thoroughly later, because he knew he was unwelcomed by the librarian. At this blatant display of hatred, Naruto wondered when the Chunin librarian was going to snap and throw him out of the library. Not anytime soon, hopefully, because he had no legitimate excuse to do so. So Naruto ignored the stare of the fuming librarian, determined to take notes from at least 2 books of each subject. He stopped taking notes once he reached his target goal for the day and began to read the extra book about ninja rank. As he skimmed through the Genin section and reached the Chunin section, Naruto couldn't help but frown. There were 2 ways to be promoted to Chunin, the exam and in-field promotion. Both routes required a Chunin to have at least a meager skill in leadership and tactics. He rolled his eyes to the fuming Chunin and then back to the book. How could that guy be promoted when he wasn't even being discreet with his glare? Then again, it was none of his business, Naruto thought as he stood up gathering the books to put them back onto shelves neatly. In the corner of his eyes he saw the Chunin stand up, looking torn between scolding and ignoring him. No doubt the Chunin thought he was trying to pull a prank or was going to damage the Academy's precious books. Naruto swiftly left the library with a stack of notes in his backpack, allowing the Chunin to check the library thoroughly for any signs of a prank. Which, of course, was just a figment of his imagination and paranoia. Idiots, Naruto thought. If Chunin were supposed to be as good as the guidebook said, they shouldn't worry about a 6-year-old pulling a prank right under their noses. For 2 months, Chunins in charge of the Academy Library were terrorized not by his pranks but by his mere presence in their humble abode, Naruto narrated sarcastically in his mind as he began his routine of visiting the library after his class finished. 2 months ago he didn't even understand what sarcasm was, but that was nothing a dictionary couldn't fix. He had asked Tori to help him buy one, because he needed it to understand some big words in the fujinjutsu manuals. He would have bought it himself if he didn't have to deal with the barely suppressed hostility of the shopkeepers, but had a bad history with bookshops after one of their staff insulted him, and he pranked them as revenge. He had visited Kurama quite often, but not intentionally at first. It just so happened when he slept, he found himself in the same sewer with the biju. He had tried anything he could think of to get in contact with Kurama on his own will, much to Kurama's ire, but his attempts had been in vain. It took 1 month for Naruto to discover how to connect with the biju through meditation, and it had been difficult. It got easier to do with time, and now he could even stay conscious when speaking to Kurama directly from his mind, although Kurama ignored him most of the time he did. Naruto guessed that was because Kurama was someone who preferred to speak face to face. Kurama was still not the most sociable biju, though Naruto was glad the fox could tolerate his presence at least. While he was not hospitable, Kurama was not against engaging in conversation with Naruto, and that was more than what a majority of people in Konoha had deigned to do. Much to Naruto's delight, Kurama was a fountain of knowledge, and he dared to say the biju was even more knowledgeable than the Sandaime. Kurama was an ancient creature after all, born from the hands of Rokudo Sennin himself. The biju had also told him about the Uzumaki clan, and Naruto was very happy to know that his clan specialized in fujinjutsu. He was saddened Uzu was no more, though. When Naruto asked how Kurama knew about the Uzumaki clan, Kurama had snorted and said, the sage of Sixth Path's wife was an Uzumaki. Originally, the Uzumaki clan descended from the Onmyuji line, and they became the first practitioners of fujinjutsu after the shinobi era began. This was why Uzumaki was said to be a distant relative of the Senju clan and the Uchihas, though it wasn't acknowledged by the Sharingan wielders for some unknown reason. With all the knowledge Kurama possessed, Naruto had to wonder why his predecessors avoided talking with the biju casually. They don't know what they missed out on. Naruto said cheerfully when Kurama told him none of his predecessors had ever bothered to listen to him, much less his story. Naruto was very happy when Kurama didn't refuse to tell the story about the Sage of Six Paths, indulging the Jinchuriki's thirst for knowledge. Then again, after years of confinement with 2 Jinchuriki who tuned him out, Kurama could appreciate a good listener in Naruto. He was also a much better teacher in history to Naruto than the Chunin in the academy. Kurama would have raised an eyebrow if he had one. My conversation with them was never civil. In fact, he could count how many times he talked with Mito and Kushina on one paw. They never wanted to speak to him and all he had said to them were taunts in his rage. I hated them and they kept me at bay, the feeling was mutual. Naruto's eyes softened at that. I guess that means I'm special then. He grinned from ear to ear. Kurama rolled his eyes. Yes, you're the dumbest, too. Naruto guessed that was Kurama's trademark of mixed compliments and sarcasm. Now, Kurama, we're trying to fix that, okay? I suppose, Kurama grunted. Now, where was I last night? You met Kinkaku and Ginkaku and they challenged you. Naruto informed the biju. Kurama grunted again, ah yes, those 2 annoying worms. From his short time knowing the fox, Kurama breathed out sarcasm as naturally as Naruto walk on his 2 feet. Unlike what Naruto read about Kyuubi in Konoha's history book and other sources, Kyuubi was not a mindless, evil entity bent on destroying the world. But he was definitely not a personification of goodness. Kurama was an intelligent biju and had a scathing, sadistic personality. However, he also had a sense of fairness and sarcastic honor. The scathing and sadistic part was a bit unnerving, especially when Kurama explained what he would like to do to Madara and the Shodai for dragging him to their family feud. Thankfully, Kurama had spared him from the 2 gory details. However, it seemed Kurama hated Madara at least 3 times more than he did the Shodai, and considering what history said about the man, Naruto had to admit that hatred was well placed. Imagine how Kurama had felt when he took a nap in his favorite dwelling only to wake up to Madara insulting and disrespecting him. The man had ranted about how Kurama's fate was as a slave for Madara's blessed eyes, and then had dragged him into a fight with the Shodai Hokage to settle a family feud. In which said feud landed Kurama in his current position. It was the reason Kurama told Naruto to be cautious of the Uchiha, while silently lamenting about how far the fruit fell from the tree. How the stupid son of his old man procreated a clan of stuck-up jerks Kurama didn't know. As far as Kurama was concerned, the descendants of the old man's stupid son were all a source of trouble. Naruto had also asked if Kurama knew about his parents, but the fox swiftly answered that he wouldn't tell Naruto anything he did he know. Kurama explained that it wasn't that he couldn't but that he shouldn't. In his opinion, people around Naruto would tell him when the time was right. It was neither Kurama's right nor duty to tell Naruto, especially since he didn't know why information about his parentage was kept secret. Kurama however implied it was a political reason, and as a biju he wouldn't get involved in it. Naruto never pried about it after that. And then I spat them out. I regret not chewing them. The biju lamented, feeling a bit ill as he recalled the brothers had eaten his gut to survive. Naruto nodded sagely. Tori always tells me to chew my food before I swallow. Naruto, they didn't give me indigestion, Kurama grumbled, and Naruto raised an eyebrow at him. Fine. They did, but that's not why I regret not chewing them. Next time I'll just have to make sure my food is dead before I swallow it. I'm sure you will. Naruto said patronizingly. Naruto started skipping his taijutsu lessons, not because he wanted to but because he was forced to. Like any other subject at the academy, the instructor always attempted to sabotage him, but in taijutsu it was not as subtle. They taught him the wrong way to stretch, even though his older classmates did it a different way. When he questioned them about it, they always said it was the correct way for a child his age. What a load of bullshit, he thought. Sparring was the worst because they always pitted him against the strongest students, and then his older classmates were given the impression that it was okay to beat him up in a spar. They were bullies and a spar was a legitimate excuse to beat someone him up. His grades, though, became better because he started paying attention and taking notes. He was no genius in class, but he wasn't the dead last either. They could sabotage his learning all they wanted to now, because he didn't buy their teaching anymore. Which was why they had started to sabotage his taijutsu training 3 times harder. He was, at first, clueless about the scheming behind his back, but ever since he found out about his jinchuriki status, he did not wish to indulge them as a punching bag. Let them call him a coward or lazy to their heart's content, he could now use his time for more productive purposes. Kurama had no intentions of pampering his jinchuriki by training him, not that the biju could anyway considering the difference in their natures, but much to Naruto's delight, Kurama still remembered what they taught in Academy to Kushina. Apparently, the biju had an almost photographic memory. Since Kurama was well. Kurama, all he said was, back then, they trained kids to increase their stamina and develop flexibility before teaching any taijutsu kata. That's it, go figure out the rest yourself. That was all Naruto needed to know, because he then went to the library and took notes about increasing stamina and flexibility. He wished he could have brought the book home, but the librarian was already so high-strung by his mere presence in library, and Naruto had no intentions of testing what the Chunin would do if he dared to approach the counter to check it out. Tori was exasperated by his decision to keep skipping taijutsu classes, but nothing he said could convince Naruto. The Umbu squad had witnessed what was happening, and they had to agree that class was too counterproductive to endure for attendance's sake. Naruto asked them to keep it a secret from Sandaime with the excuse of not wanting to trouble the Hokage because he looked so busy lately. They couldn't refute that since Sandaime was in a lot of political pressure lately. If Naruto could be so considerate for their Hokage, who were they to not do the same? Unfortunately, shinobi couldn't teach academy students without legal permission, but they could always give Naruto pointers and prevent him from accidentally injuring himself. Naruto was thankful for that, especially since Kurama had made it clear he didn't want to heal sprains caused by a mistake in stretching. Naruto hoped this would be the end of his problem in the academy. 1 week later. And so, that concludes the battle between the Shodai Hokage and Uchiha Madara that created the vast crater that is now known as the Valley of the End. Naruto was reciting what Kurama had said about the petty family feud he'd been dragged into, omitting some gory parts and the insults. Naruto looked up from his essay, and was greeted by the dumbstruck face of his teacher and the rest of the class. The Chunin was so pale it looked like he was going to faint. Naruto groaned inwardly. It seemed he had just flunked history class. Why did he always feel like he was walking on a tightrope in school? The Chunin was probably thinking Naruto could never write a detailed essay like that, because he hadn't lived through it. He had been so careful trying to write the essay with information that could be taken from the available history books, though he had borrowed Kurama's narrative style since the fox was such a good storyteller. Then again, The thought of Kyubi writing an essay about Shodaime and Madara was absurd. Why the Chunin could ever believe that for a moment was beyond him. Kurama was right, there were too many idiots in this village. Sooner or later he would have to fake his mark in every subject. What was the point of going to school at this rate? Naruto walked out of the school with a heavy heart, and went to the forest near the Uchiha compound. His mood brightened at the sight of a gigantic oak tree, his favorite place. Kurama had told him in a disgusted tone that the tree was a historical living monument, grown by the Shodaime as a sign of friendship for the Uchiha clan. If one looked closely at the peak of its trunk, a faint carving of the Uchiha and Senju crest could be seen. He liked to sleep on its thick branch, under its lush leaves. The atmosphere was soothing and it always calmed his mind. It was his favorite pastime to relax and reread his notes there. Naruto climbed the tree swiftly, using chakra so his limbs would stick to the surface. Naruto was still trying to improve his tree walking, but slow progress was better than nothing. Ha! He heaved the sigh as he pushed himself up to his favorite branch. School sucks, he grumbled under his breath as he pulled his notes from his backpack. He leaned against the trunk using his backpack as a replacement pillow. The jinchuriki opened his fujinjutsu notebook, which was the thickest one he had compiled. He had found some samples of standard seals and was in the process of breaking it down into specific components so he could study its mechanics. It was easy to take a sample of the tags from a shop when the owner was serving another customer, and since it was drawn with normal ink and not chakra ink, it wouldn't explode. Naruto was pondering over the sample flash tag when a voice snapped him out of his thoughts. Good afternoon. He flailed his arms out, almost losing his balance, and accidentally knocked his backpack over. He quickly grabbed it, but the contents poured over the newcomer that greeted him. Naruto watched in abject horror as his history essay homework fell right above the newcomer's head. While it was just a pile of papers, the height the pile was dropped at was enough to do damage to someone's skull. The newcomer caught the book in midair calmly and without even looking, and Naruto breathed out a sigh of relief. He then gasped when he saw it was raining papers. He had accidentally knocked over the stack of notes he put beside him. Naruto would have come down in a heartbeat to retrieve his notes, but when the stranger bent over to pick up the papers, he revealed the Uchiha symbol on his back, causing him to freeze up. An Uchiha. Soon after he found out about Kyubi, Naruto had started to pick up things he hadn't noticed before. The village, or at least the shinobi population and a minority of the civilians, ostracized the Uchiha clan. It was not the outright staring or shunning they did to him, but he could tell they eyed the Uchiha clan cautiously. It was as though they thought the clan would kill them in their sleep, and it was easy to guess why. After all, it was a well-known fact biju could only be controlled by an Uchiha, a Mokuton user, or a jinchuriki. Which also explained why the clan avoided him like plague. In fact, he rarely saw an Uchiha walk on the same street as him. And yet this Uchiha had approached and talked to him. Was this guy crazy? No good, no good, he chanted in his mind as he sweated profusely. Why had he asked Tori and his team to leave him alone for a while? He had even promised them he wouldn't get into trouble. Then again, he had thought no one would find him here, yet this guy had walked right up to him. It took all his willpower to not just bolt and get the hell away. Naruto had nothing against the Uchiha clan personally, but Kurama's rant about how they were the harbingers of doom who wasted his old man's good gene was not helping. Kurama was also very certain that not being alert around the Jujutsu-bearing clan would kill him in the end. It was enough to put Naruto on edge whenever he spotted an Uchiha nearby. Naruto was so engrossed in his thoughts that he didn't notice the Uchiha was reading his history essay. The jinchuriki blinked when he heard the sound of papers ruffling and saw that Uchiha was reading his homework. Aya! He pointed at the dark-haired Uchiha. Oi! Don't read someone else's stuff without permission. The Uchiha looked up from his reading to eye Naruto curiously. Naruto stared right back at the Uchiha. He was older than Naruto, but still a young Uchiha with onyx eyes, black hair with bangs that framed his face, and a low-tied ponytail. There was also a distinct line under each of his eyes that made him look slightly older than his age. My apologies, the Uchiha said. I'm interested in history, especially about our village, and your essay is a very interesting read. Naruto raised an eyebrow, and after a beat the Uchiha added, it's enlightening. Naruto stared at the Uchiha in disbelief, and mentally asked his tenant, Kurama, is this guy for real? What should I do? You're asking me. How should I know? My routine when I see an Uchiha is maim, kill, or eat, Kurama griped. Naruto sighed. Advice for a human, please. Kurama groaned. How could you run into an Uchiha here anyway? Naruto rolled his eyes inwardly. This forest is near their compound, although it's in another area opposite of this place. True, but still, how likely is it that an Uchiha stumbles upon you in such a big forest? Kurama wondered with a sigh. Uchiha are always the source of trouble and you're one trouble magnet, Naruto. To my eternal shame, it's like you and the Uchihas are a match made in heaven. Is this really the time to be sarcastic, Kurama? Naruto asked internally, gritting his teeth. Naruto smiled sheepishly at the Uchiha. Excuse me, but could you give me my essay and notes back? The Uchiha nodded curtly and Naruto almost sighed in relief, but held his breath when the Uchiha started walking up the tree. Wait. He had thought the older boy was going to just leave his stuff on the ground and go away, not come closer. The Uchiha ignored his plea and jumped onto the branch Naruto occupied. He crouched down and then put the essay and notes in front of Naruto in a neat stack. Here. Naruto rubbed his throbbing cranium and then looked around the surrounding area, sniffing the air. The Uchiha's lips curved up at him. There's no one around for at least a 3-mile radius, Uzumaki Naruto-kun. Naruto took his notes and essay back hesitantly, eyes never leaving the Uchiha as he put his stuff back into his backpack. Do I know you? He asked. Ah, my apologies. Again with the apologies, what a weird Uchiha, Naruto thought. My name is Uchiha Itachi. Great. The prodigy of the Uchiha clan himself and no one in a 3-mile radius. Wonderful. He ignored Kurama's praise about Naruto becoming a master in the art of sarcasm. Naruto was too busy wondering if the Uchiha was planning to kill him. You know who I am, right? I believe I just called you by your full name, Naruto-kun, Itachi informed the Jinchuriki. Naruto's left eye twitched, and he wondered if Itachi was being sarcastic or just pointing out facts. Right. He drawled, and then decided to bite the bullet. Why are you talking to me, Uchiha-san? Itachi eyed Naruto keenly, and Naruto averted his eyes. Do I need a reason? He asked back. Uchiha-san, Naruto called. I am Uzumaki Naruto, and I have seen members of your clan turn on their heels whenever I was in their vicinity. He might as well tell the prodigy he was well aware of the Uchiha clan's behavior around him. I thought you were going to do the same. The heir of the Uchiha clan smiled at that. You're more perceptive than the rumors state, Itachi said after a beat, or my clan is not as subtle as I thought. A mix of both actually. Why he indulged the Uchiha by continuing on with the conversation was beyond him, but it was unlikely he would get away anytime soon. Sometimes, even ninja won't be subtle when they don't know they're being watched. I still remember you haven't answered my question about why you didn't avoid me like the rest of your clan, Naruto informed Itachi in an annoyed tone, and I would like an answer soon. Itachi looked amused by Naruto's words. Exception proves the rule. Naruto groaned. Okay, seriously, what do you want, Uchiha-san? Kurama was getting restless in his cage, screaming at his Jinchuriki to get the hell away from the bastard Uchiha. Can I leave now? Why would you want to leave? Itachi questioned back. This was getting nowhere, the prodigy was leading him on. Your lack of answer makes me nervous. Screw subtlety, mind games weren't his forte. Itachi's lips curved up into a small smile, which caught Naruto off guard. Would you believe me if I said I'm interested in your essay? He asked genially, much to Naruto's shock. Naruto blinked owlishly. My essay? What's so interesting about it? He asked warily. You're an active ninja, and that essay is written by an academy student. Itachi sniffed. It's still better than what I read in standard history books. It's very detailed, too. Naruto was torn between feeling flattered someone thought his writing was good, and horrified Itachi might think he was the Kyuubi. Thank you, so. He trailed off as he fished his essay from his backpack. You want it? He offered as he handed the essay over. In the back of his mind Kurama was rolling in his cage, laughing that Naruto thought Itachi would leave him alone if he gave the older boy his essay. Itachi blinked owlishly at the offer. Can I? Naruto nodded. It's already graded and I have another copy at home, he replied sincerely as Itachi accepted the neatly folded paper. Itachi gave him a curt nod, his eyes scanning the paper curiously. Thank you, he said as he looked up only to find Naruto had disappeared. All that was left was paper floating in front of his face. He raised an eyebrow when he read the title of it. Mathematic Application in Fujinjutsu. Itachi looked to the side and found Naruto was running like his life depended on it. Naruto was jumping through the branches and thick foliage, hoping the Uchiha was not going to. Wait, Naruto-kun. Oh shit. Naruto's mind went haywire, and Kurama jokingly chanting, "Run for your life," in the back of his mind was not helping either. Naruto moved faster, caution thrown to the wind as branches broke under his feet from the increased speed. Itachi had to take a different route than the one Naruto used because the younger destroyed it. You left something. Itachi shouted. He could go faster and simply catch the younger boy, but it was obvious Naruto was terrified of him for some reason and doing so would risk him harming Naruto accidentally. Naruto's left eye twitched violently when he heard what Itachi said. Who was going to buy that? As soon as he reached the border of the forest he shouted, Tori. The Umbu was almost knocked off of his feet, because the moment he appeared with Shushin Naruto tackled him. Oof. Tori. Save me. Okay, not the smartest thing he had ever said, but he was too terrified to think otherwise. Tori raised an eyebrow at the Uchiha heir who shrugged nonchalantly. Okay. Itachi-kun, what's going on here? Itachi was a fresh chunin that had been considered for a place on his squad, so he knew who the Prodigy was. I just wanted to return this to him, that's all, the Uchiha heir replied honestly, pulling out a sheet of paper with neat handwriting to show the Umbu. Tori sighed and looked at the trembling child in his arms. I feel this is a long story Hokage-sama would like to hear. The Sandaime rubbed his throbbing cranium as his eyes rested briefly on Itachi, who looked as stoic as ever, then to the Umbu squad he had assigned to guard Naruto, and lastly to Naruto who was hiding behind Tori's legs, clinging onto the Umbu's pants as though his life depended on it. It had been a while since Naruto had been reduced to that state. The last time was when the boy was 4 and had believed the orphanage matron when she'd said there was a monster under his bed. So, it's all a misunderstanding. Sarutobi Hiruzen asked as he quirked an eyebrow at the Uchiha scion. Yes, Hokage same. Then he turned to the still-hidden Naruto and showed the boy the paper he found. And I believe this is yours, Naruto-kun. Naruto eyed the paper longingly, then looked at Tori and the Sandaime. Sandaime sighed. Itachi-kun, can you tell me the more detailed version? Because stumbling upon Naruto-kun and having a brief chat with him when he suddenly runs away doesn't explain much. He said in exasperation. Well, he had asked for a brief report. Itachi stiffened then shifted a little. Hokage-sama, I'm afraid it's not my story to tell if you want the details of our conversation. Sandaime Hokage narrowed his eyes at Itachi then at Naruto. It seemed both of them wanted to keep the conversation a secret. Very well. He pushed a small amount of chakra into a hidden seal near the window. Anything said here will not leave this room. Naruto stared at the seal that glowed briefly a moment ago. So that's how privacy seals worked. Naruto-kun, the young jinchuriki jumped when the Uchiha called him. Do you mind if we tell Hokage-sama what happened? He asked. The young jinchuriki flinched, wondering why Itachi even bothered to ask. He couldn't decide if the conversation was a harmless topic or not, so decided to give in and avoid suspicion. He had kept too many secrets from Sandaime Jiiken anyway. I don't mind. He'd calmed down with the presence of familiar people around him. It was just he'd never been alone with a potentially hostile stranger, that he knew of, which was why he'd panicked. Itachi smiled at that. For starters, I did stumble upon Naruto who was sitting on a branch of a gigantic oak tree in the forest. Sandaime raised an eyebrow. Gigantic oak tree in the North Forest? There's such a tree. Konoha, just like her namesake, was full of lush forests, and though a majority of gigantic trees grew in Training Ground 44, some were scattered all over Konoha. Most of the tree species were pine, cedar and yew but never an oak. Shodaime grew trees about as often as breathing, so no one ever bothered to keep track of them all. Naruto nodded as he stepped forward. Yujo no Ki, the tree Shodaime gave to the Uchiha clan as a gift. A spell of silence hung in the air as all eyes stared at Naruto. Even the stoic Uchiha Itachi stared at him with no small amount of incredulity. It was Sandaime who broke the silence. There's such a tree? Naruto had a very bad feeling he had just dropped a bomb with his trivia. Neither Kurama nor Naruto knew that said tree had been forgotten about in the Enidaime's era after the relationship between the two clans became sour once again, which was why not even Sandaime knew about the tree. Never mind, Sandaime sighed. So what were you talking about? Itachi turned his focus back to the Hokage then answered. Naruto-kun's history essay, he said as he put the folded paper on the Hokage's desk. It's very good, and he was kind enough to give it to me. Naruto shifted on his feet when Sandaime unfolded the paper and began to read his essay. It's very good as you said, Itachi-kun. Good enough to impress the Uchiha scion, Sandaime noted amusedly. Itachi had always been a highly perceptive child wise beyond his years and spent much of his time researching the history of the village from the writings their ancestors left behind. While the essay was good and interesting to read, Sandaime was convinced that it wasn't the content that made Itachi interested but the disturbingly detailed narrative style it was in. While everything written in the essay could be found in history books, the way Naruto narrated it made it feel like he was watching the event with his own eyes, or at least heard it from someone who experienced the battle firsthand. That didn't explain why Naruto-kun ran away from you and gave you his essay, the Hokage continued, eyeing the prodigy as he searched for a sign of dishonesty. Itachi shrugged. I think it served as a diversion for his escape. Naruto cringed at how obvious he'd been. Itachi, on the other hand, was resigned about telling the Hokage the truth. Why he ran? That's probably because he is aware of how my clan avoids him and was pretty unnerved when I approached him. Naruto flinched at the attention that centered on him. Well. I know I'm not well liked, but only Uchihas turn on their heels whenever they see me. He fidgeted. And he looked pointedly at Itachi, approached me, and he even talked to me civilly so. I was getting cautious and nervous. Sandaime and the Umbu members cringed inwardly at Naruto's innocent confession. All this time they'd been under the impression Naruto was very trusting and friendly to anyone who gave him even a shred of attention, yet it seemed they had been wrong. I'm sorry I ran away, Uchiha-san, Naruto said as he gave Itachi a low bow. I'm just not used to strangers. At least, not since he'd found out about Kurama and his status. I didn't mean to be rude. Itachi shook his head. You don't have to apologize, being vigilant and cautious are good traits for shinobi. Naruto preened under the compliment. No matter what Kurama said about Uchihas, Itachi sounded sincere. And I believe I should return this. But before that, Hokage interrupted their exchange, partially relieved the misunderstanding was solved. Can I see that paper? Naruto blanched, but there was nothing he could do. He gave Itachi a reluctant nod to hand the paper over to Sandaime. Busted. Sandaime's eyes widened when he saw what was written on the paper. It was basic research on fujinjutsu, but very elaborate and intelligible. You're learning fujinjutsu, Naruto-kun? He was definitely his parents' child, a budding fujinjutsu prodigy. Naruto nodded wordlessly. Can I see your other notes? Much to everyone's shock, Naruto backed away like a frightened rabbit and hugged his backpack protectively. Naruto-kun. Tori said worriedly. He couldn't recall Naruto being so possessive over something aside from ramen. Sarutobi Hiruzen chuckled softly. He had almost forgotten how protective and private the practitioner of the obscure art could be of their research, and how much they hated someone to take a peek at their notes. Jiraiya had almost punched him in the jaw when he insisted on peering over his disciple's shoulder when he wrote his notes out of curiosity. If the stories about what Minato and Kushina did to anyone who dared to take a peek on their notes without permission were true. Sandaime mentally noted to warn Naruto's future teammates about proper conduct of privacy for fujinjutsu practitioner. Kurama groaned in his cage as he watched his jinchuriki's behavior. The Uzumaki always acted like mama bears protecting their cubs when it came to their research. It was an Uzumaki thing, though anyone who was taught by Uzumaki also acted like Jiraiya and Minato. Naruto was only just about to finish his research on basic study, and already he was this protective. Kurama didn't even want to know what Naruto would do if someone dared to look at his personal seal research without permission in the future. Maybe the only mistakes old man Rokudo ever did was procreating Uchiha Senju and marrying that Uzumaki woman. Naruto-kun, I will return your notes, and I will be careful with it, Sandaime promised. Naruto looked hesitant for a moment, then he gingerly approached Sandaime's desk and tiptoed to put his notes on it. Here, Ji-chan. Thank you, Naruto-kun. Sandaime smiled at the child as he carefully flipped the pages. Impressive. You're a budding prodigy in fujinjutsu, Naruto-kun. Naruto preened under the praise. Really? He beamed, giving a mental nod to Kurama when the fox reminded him to stay vigilant. You have grown to be such a knowledgeable child, Naruto. Heh. I read a lot, Naruto admitted not so modestly. Ah yes. Sandaime nodded sagely as he gave Naruto his notes back. And you even know about Yujo no Ki, something I didn't even know about. Where did you read it? Naruto froze in his tracks. Kurama, why doesn't Ji-chan know about that tree? The fox snorted, probably because peace between the Uchihas and Senjus didn't last long, so the tree, of course, was forgotten. Then what should I say? I can't tell them you told me. Naruto lamented, but Kurama didn't answer, so he was left to his own devices. Naruto smiled as he recalled what he found on the same day he climbed the tree for the first time. Heh. He rubbed the back of his head sheepishly, I'm just guessing actually. Sandaime raised an eyebrow. On the top of the tree there's a carving of the Senju and Uchiha crest. Above it is Konoha's crest with the word Yujo written. And since the tree is so big, much bigger than a normal tree, so I thought only the Shodaime could grow it out. Even if the Hokage sent his ninjas out to check, the story would fit since there was such a carving. The Sandaime nodded sagely. It seemed he was overthinking Naruto's resourcefulness. Well done, Naruto-kun. You've found a precious monument, a legacy from our Shodaime. He mentally noted to issue a D rank to build a nice shiny signage and put sacred rope around the tree. Naruto smiled sheepishly. Thanks, Ji-chan. He said as he checked his notes, and then rechecked to make sure it was placed properly, blissfully unaware of the sad look on the Sandaime's face. It seemed Naruto didn't trust him. Then again, it was pretty normal for those who descended from the Uzumaki line. Sandaime sighed wearily, Naruto-kun, while it's fine to learn new things, it's frowned upon that you neglect your other subjects in school. Naruto shifted guiltily on his feet. You've skipped all your taijutsu classes, and your marks, which became better last month, have dropped again. Sandaime said wearily. What can you say in your defense? Much to Naruto's relief, Tori stepped forward. Hokage-sama, may I voice my opinion? He asked cordially. Sandaime nodded, I'm all ears, Tori. The Umbu cleared his throat. From my observations, Naruto-kun is not suited to the current curriculum of our academy, he stated sternly, and the boy stared openly at the bird-masked Umbu. Most of the classes are counterproductive to Naruto-kun's development, and the instructors are not. The Umbu trailed off, looking for a fitting word. Proficient, in dealing with a student like him. The Hokage flinched inwardly at the subtle way his Umbu phrased the predicament. Then please explain to me what kind of student Naruto-kun is, and how we should provide him with a suitable tutelage. Tori grinned under his mask. Naruto-kun is a very talented child, and if we keep him in the academy, it would just curb his potential. Then after a beat he added, Naruto-kun has shown a remarkable aptitude for fujinjutsu, a field of study that unfortunately, is not provided in the academy. And we all know what an invaluable asset a fujinjutsu practitioner is. Sandaime nodded sagely in agreement. The main defense mechanism of Konoha was the legacy of Uzumaki Mito, and she was the best practitioner in her generation. Jiraiya, Minato, and Kushina were SEAL masters and the key players in previous wars, with the first traveling to maintain their spy network and the latters passed away. Konoha was down to mid-level practitioners who maintained Konoha's barrier and the defense mechanism Mito-sama left them. It was hard to nurture a talented SEAL master due to the high risk in learning and difficulties. Naruto-kun's potential as a fujinjutsu practitioner should be utilized. It's an asset Konoha can't afford to lose, Tori stated with conviction. That alone should give him some privilege to further his studies in SEALs and other shinobi arts. The old Hokage held back a grin. Someone deserved a promotion for exploiting a loophole so as to give Naruto his education. Konoha had given many privileges to prodigies, though most of the time it was early graduation, like the one granted to Itachi, so the prodigy could gain field experience sooner. However, in Naruto's case, he was known as a prodigy in only certain field. I see. Naruto-kun. The boy perked up at the Hokage, elated he was once again included in the conversation. You will spend the rest of this year in academy. And no more skipping classes. Naruto cringed at Sandaime's warning. I will talk with the academy's instructors about your circumstances. If everything went smoothly, no instructor would refuse to help Naruto anymore. In fact, they would be eager to help, or at least neutral. By the end of the year, I would like to see progress in the shinobi arts, especially fujinjutsu. Naruto nodded again. Hi. Especially fujinjutsu, the Sandaime repeated. If you continue to make the same progress I have seen from your notes, you will be granted the privilege of an apprenticeship. Naruto gaped at that. Apprenticeship? What about the academy? The Hokage smiled at that. You won't be required to attend it anymore. Which would make the instructors happy that they didn't have to deal with Naruto anymore. You will be considered graduated, but you won't be granted genin status until your master deems you genin level in the shinobi arts overall. The Sandaime finished his explanation, and as soon as the last word left his mouth, Naruto tackled him in a bear hug. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Naruto chanted happily, then he kissed the Sandaime's cheeks fervently. I love you, Hokage-chan. You're the best. Sandaime chuckled softly as he ruffled Naruto's spiky hair. Yes, I am, but remember, it's you who has to work hard to earn these privileges. Naruto nodded enthusiastically. Of course, Ji-chan. I'll work hard. He said as he released his hug, jumping backwards to land in front of the Hokage's desk. Naruto stood suddenly and bowed to the Sandaime with respect. Hokage-sama, I thank you for giving me this opportunity. I promise to dedicate myself to fujinjutsu and other shinobi arts, so that I will not betray your expectations. Sandaime looked at Naruto in surprise, startled to see such a mature, eloquent speech coming from a 6-year-old kid. Even Tori looked surprised and proud under his mask, while Itachi observed his fellow prodigy attentively. The old Kage shook his head with an amused smile on his face. It seemed they had underestimated Naruto a bit too much. I'm looking forward to it, Naruto-kun. That's it for part 1. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.